It's time to accelerate. Hey friends, this is Andy. Welcome to episode 494 of Accelerate, the sales podcast of record, where I hold in-depth conversations with today's leading experts in sales, marketing, and leadership 6 days a week. Now, if you like the show, it'd really help us out if you subscribed, left a review for us. And you can do all that with the podcast app on the phone you're using to listen to this podcast. So go ahead, hit pause, subscribe, and leave your quick review, and then come right back. We'll be waiting for you. Joining me on the show for the second time is Townsend Wardlaw. He's a sales transformation architect, a really smart guy about sales. And I asked Townsend to come back on the show and talk about sales forecasting. He's doing a bunch of writing about the topic, and it's really an essential element of your overall sales effort that just doesn't get enough attention. And it's really important to get it right. So let's talk to Townsend about that. Townsend, my friend, welcome back to Accelerate.
Thank you, Andy. Good to be back.
Yeah, dude, how you doing?
Quite well. It took us a little bit to get rescheduled here. It's been a couple of back and forths, right?
Well, you are in high demand, so it's hard to get on your calendar.
I don't know about that. Well, maybe some days. Yeah. No, it's been an incredible start of 2017. So much fun stuff going on. So many cool clients and opportunities, and yeah, it's been a blast. I feel like I look up and my gosh, it's almost May here, so I'm not really sure.
As we record this, yes, it's almost May, which is scary to think about because,
right?
Yeah, we're a third of the way through the year. I mean, it's where to go. I mean, yeah, I'm like you. It's been a gas. I've been everywhere, but it's like, wow. It seems like I'm planning things in September, October already, and it's like, geez, that's right around the corner.
No.
Yeah, I don't need time to fly so fast. You get to be my age, you want time to slow down.
Slow it down.
Slow it down.
That's actually an interesting talk track on a certain level. Is that one of my goals this year was to do more, accomplish more stuff with less apparent energy, and to not have things quite so packed. So that's really been something I've been focusing on is both time management, sequencing, how I'm blocking my time, and I took my first business travel trip this year. Some people, people who don't know me won't know that one of the things I abhor is getting on a plane and having to fly someplace. So I do, the vast majority of my work remotely. Mm-hmm. But I actually went down and visited a customer for the first time in about 3 years. That was fascinating.
Now, was that you we saw getting dragged off the United flight?
I think I would have put up more of a fight, to be honest with you. But might not have gone so well for me, but I would at least, put up a good fight.
Well, you don't fly. Are you afraid of flying?
No, I'm actually not. I hate the waste of time and energy, right? To go and see somebody for a day, it's basically either 2 days out of your life or a major pain in the butt. You got to wake up really early. You got to fly in late, interrupts my hobbies, my sleep, my drinking, all the things I really enjoy. No, it's just I actually made a decision about it was interesting.
Now, is drinking one of your hobbies? I'm sorry, I didn't.
No, that's part of my professional livelihood.
Oh, okay.
Just kidding. I was going to say that it was actually about 6 years ago that I decided I wasn't going to travel for work. Prior to that, I was doing what I would call traditional consulting, getting on a plane, et cetera. Sure. And had a bunch of things going on with my boys, that I really needed to be close to home and around. And I said, I'm just not doing it. I literally went out one day and talked to all my clients that were remote, which was all of them at the time. And I said, I can't work with you anymore. I'm done. And I basically have recrafted my whole consulting practice where I won't go travel, at least unless I really, 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 really like somebody and they're paying me a whole lot of money. Now, if you want to know what the secret is to avoiding business travel, I actually can share that with your listeners if you think that might be helpful.
I'm sure they're waiting on the edge of their seats to find out.
Yeah. It's pretty simple. You actually quote them a rate so absurd for leaving your house that all of a sudden it sounds really attractive to do things remotely. So I always, I never say to somebody, I'm not going to travel. I say, I'm happy to come and visit you. Let me share my day rate when I'm needing to, go to the airport and do all this stuff. And then I say, the good news is, if I don't have to do that, here's what that's going to look like. And it's really surprising. They'll almost invariably say, yeah, we're fine with this remote stuff. It'll just great.
Yeah. Well, I think that, I don't know. Does anybody still sort of glorify, business travel the way it used to be. Yeah, I remember one time I was working for a startup back, I guess it was 20 years ago, and the CEO was and I were sort of dueling about travel. And he said, well, I don't think we have to go see these guys. And this was before a lot of the tools existed to do a lot of the remote work the way it's done today.
Right.
And his claim was basically that travel was a perk. I was like,
yeah.
Let me think about that for a second. You're obviously speaking like someone who's not traveling a lot.
Never actually done it. Yeah. Well, it's definitely not a perk, but I'll tell you, I'd say about half of my work with clients is, and I may have shared this before, but my core client are these, $2 to $10 million companies where still typically founder led, and they've hit a plateau, and they mostly have small sales teams. And I'm coming in to help, the CEO who's probably fired their third VP of sales or whatever to really get their arms around it and fix this once and for all.
I understand perfectly. That was what before I started all this stuff, that was my consulting practice too.
Yeah. So in that capacity, I'm playing a kind of a quasi manager role of these sales folks, and I'm always amazed at the willingness of salespeople to hop on a plane, fly halfway across the country or all the way across the country for what, when you really dig into it, is a poorly qualified sales call. And they're using I'll be in the neighborhood or, hey, just drop in.
Sure.
And I'm saying, you understand the cost in terms of dollars and your, an opportunity cost, not even to mention that. So it's amazing to me.
Well, I have to admit, I've used that tactic before, and but not. I had hoped for not for poorly qualified, clients. But I remember again. I hate to date myself, but back in the day, we'd do something similar with overseas clients.
Sure. Yeah. Well, you had to do such things, right? We didn't have this beautiful internet and Skype and join.me, and it's just amazing that with the technology we have, people still want to inconvenience themselves and others. So
basically in many cases we're going over and making cold calls. I remember getting on a plane and I was selling something where there's a pretty limited set of potential clients, right? Probably 200 worldwide.
Yeah.
And so I was pretty much in contact with a good majority of them, and at some point or another they all would have been prospects. Given the time, if I had a really good call lined up with somebody that's getting ready to close a deal, and these are multi-million-dollar deals, let's say in London, I'd call everybody else I knew in the UK and Europe and say, hey, I'm gonna be over there.
Yeah, that's if you happen to already be there to see somebody who's going to give you real money. Yeah, I get that, but to create these sort of fantasy trips,
exactly.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that a little bit, because one of the things that you and I share a real interest in is his productivity and sales productivity, and I'm sort of concerned, I guess is the right word, is that we have this amazing infusion of technology and innovation coming into the sales space, and yet if you look at least the reports I see and talking to people, it doesn't seem to be moving the needle in general in sales. And in some cases, and I know you're concerned about this, in some cases perhaps even encouraging wrong behavior. So let's dive into that a bit. What are you seeing in that regard?
It's the number one challenge that I see for selling organizations, and it's getting worse, not better.
Productivity.
Yeah, absolutely. And for me, I'm not even talking about efficiency. I'm talking about the raw output of basic activities, right? At the end of the day, selling is a function of a number of interconnected activities that have to start someplace. And when you go all the way to the top and you say, what's going on to drive top of the funnel activity? I don't care what it is. There's not enough. As I've shared before in this show, the things that I care about are obviously raw activity, but to me, the fundamental metric that any organization can use to assess its health is how many top of the funnel first scheduled conversations are reps or whatever you call them on a week, right? If that number is any less than 8, you're suboptimized, right? If you think about how a funnel plays out, how first conversations turn into discovery, turn into, whatever your process is, every organization can sustain a minimum of 8 and ideally even more like 10 or more top of the funnel first conversations. I'm talking a 20-minute, hey, saw you on our website, or, whatever it is. In order to generate those conversations, you have to actually, perform activities, emails, cold calls, social selling, whatever your little flavor of the month is. But when I actually look at what the reps are doing, the answer is typically 1 or 2. Right. So there's the one leg of the stool is, okay, so you're not on enough top of the funnel conversations. Then you say, okay, what's the root cause of that? And you go over and you look at the raw activity they're generating to try and, create those first meetings, and you'll see 20 dials, right? 20 literal phone dials, possibly the same amount of emails. And you kind of step back and you go, what are these people doing all week? And I hate to slam reps and such, but the reality is when you look at the problem, it almost always relates to you're not doing enough stuff. I don't know what you're doing all week.
Well, now in these cases where the people aren't doing enough, I mean, do they not have systems in place to be able to measure activity?
Yeah, they do. Let me caveat. Oftentimes before I come in, they don't, right? So literally they don't even know what they're doing or their manager doesn't know. And what's astounding to me is that even post, fixing the CRM and setting up the workflow so they can actually do things efficiently, they don't move the needle very much at all on their level of activity. Then you sit there and say, okay, maybe there's not enough leads, maybe there's not enough prospects to call, maybe they don't have good numbers. The astounding thing, once again, Andy, is that for the vast majority of these reps, even when you remove all these barriers out of the way, you take a step back and you go, there's simply not enough activity. There's simply not enough stuff getting done.
Well, all right. So I said you deal primarily with small businesses. I said 2 to 10 million. How are they staying in business if they're not generating sales activity?
You got me. I mean, so it's sort of tongue in cheek. For my core customer, typically it's because the founder is still heavily involved in selling, right?
Exactly.
Now, I'll tell you this: in this year, since the beginning of the year, I've actually worked with 2 much larger clients. We're talking 50, 60, 80 reps, and I still see the same problem for the vast majority of reps on the team, right? There's always the outliers who are, hitting it hard and shockingly, as a result of that, they're bringing in deals and filling their pipeline, et cetera. But the vast majority, I just did a diagnostic on a Salesforce.com instance, and the sum of activity, the average rolling 30-day activity count for these are inside sales reps, right? 65 touches, 65 activities.
Per week.
Including trailing 30-day metric.
Oh, that's my God. 30 days.
That's 30 days. Scratch your head. I don't understand it.
Well, so why is management letting them get away with it?
That's a good question. I've always said that, the problems exist in sort of this order. Number one, either, you're not setting the right expectations, right? You don't know what you should set. Right? I think all managers inherently have this, fear of micromanaging. So it's tough for them to say, freaking make $60 a day, do it, right? So number one is you haven't set the expectation. The other is you're not actually managing it, measuring it, et cetera. So that's the second biggest challenge. The third, however, and I think this is the most insidious, Andy, is that for most organizations, they don't really have the process and the infrastructure to bring in new talent. So if you're sitting there as a manager, all right, and you're trying to keep the flywheel going, and you got a rep who's underperforming. Now, what you need to do is go over there, talk to them, have a conversation, try to make them successful, put them on a plan, and then if they can't do it, move them out of the organization. However, now you have a hole, which A, you might not get filled again, B, you might get with somebody worse, or you're going to have to do the training, And I think that's ultimately the underlying challenge. And I've said this probably now for about a decade, maybe even a decade and a half. Sales organizations improve through upward pressure, right? If you don't have the infrastructure to identify talent, to hire, to onboard, to train, to basically get people enabled in their job, you are stuck with the reps you have. And ultimately, they're going to settle on whatever level of performance they're going to settle at because you have no leverage, right? They have to get so bad that they're a detriment to you before you actually do something about it. And, people know that. It's just,
it's true. That's small business. I think this is one of the critical things that we talk about. I mean, oftentimes you see it too in small business that with their sales forces, there are, I call them structural impediments to increase productivity that oftentimes relate to, hey, first guys in the door, the first 2 sales guys in the door have all the accounts,
right?
And so everybody else that they bring in, they expect to go out and harvest new accounts, which they'll do, but the ones that are the biggest and best are being milked by 2 guys that actually should be out selling new accounts as well.
Should be, yeah.
And so there's no sharing of the wealth. And I've gone into several companies where we've gone through the trauma of reallocating accounts. And it creates a huge uplift because what they find out suddenly is these people that weren't performing, who maybe had the activity level but weren't performing, suddenly get experience actually selling the product and service.
Yeah.
And yeah, you get this huge uplift.
Well, you kind of got me fired up a little bit because I'm thinking about the soapboxes that I've been on this year, right? And there's a couple things. One of the things I do is I sit down at the end of the year and I look at all the clients, all the people I've worked with. And I say, okay, what were the biggest challenges that I saw? What were the biggest problems that if we solved once and for all, would make a huge impact, right? So activity was one of them last year. Obviously, that seems to be on the list every year. The other big one that I've been just absolutely banging the drum on is the concept of who people are interfacing with in terms of what most people would call the decision maker, right? So my soapbox has been, as I look at opportunities, as I look at activity, as I look at all the effort that's going on, the vast majority of these so-called sales opportunities, the stuff that salespeople are working on, is being conducted with people with whom they don't even know whether they are part of the decision process, where they fit, how they would make a decision. It's almost like they're walking into Starbucks and talking to people about their product. To me, it's the equivalent. If you don't, and so one of the things I did is I've rewired how I look at even the opportunity funnel, and I've put this whole process around identifying what I call the person of authority very early in the process. Mm-hmm. And as I've implemented this since the first of the year, the absolutely astounding thing are the number of rep pipelines that I've gone through where they're absolutely filled to the brim with so-called deals that when you poke on them, the person they're talking to not only has no decision-making authority at all, has no idea who they would actually go to for the decision or how that would be communicated. Yet, that's where the reps are spending their time. They're spending this massive amount of time. And if you track that back to the, so what, who cares? For my mind, and this is what we looked at last year, this is where the vast majority of these so-called, closed loss, no decisions come from, right?
Sure.
Oh, budget was pushed, or they're, basically a bunch of nonsense. It's all code for, I was never talking to somebody who could make a decision.
No, they talk about this in the Challenger customer. You're talking to the friendly person that's there and prepared to talk with you.
Yeah. Everybody's having a good time.
Yeah.
No revenue's coming in.
No revenue's coming in, but we've got this great contact. Well, it's funny when you push on those type of deals. What I find, and the sort of rule of thumb or the heuristic I give people to use is, the quality of the deal is an inverse proportion to the degree of defensiveness the rep has when you start pushing on it.
That's a beautiful maxim. Exactly.
Right. So the more defensive they get, the more you are convinced that that's a bad deal.
I've been having a very productive year in terms of rep defensivity towards me. I don't know if that's even a word, but that's definitely been a theme as I've started pushing on it. It's just fascinating. I don't know. I look at the whole sales ecosystem, and I truly think that sales is a fun profession. I don't think it's hard. I don't think it's confrontational. I think it's just a simple set of conversations wherein we're trying to understand what the prospect is trying to accomplish and help them with it if we can. If not, move on. Yet I think so many people make it so difficult, and I'm always going to push back and say that's largely a function of the fact that most of the people out there, the so-called sales professionals, have learned to sell from these companies who brought them in, taught them a product, taught them a demo, showed them a process that's never really been proven or A/B tested or anything, and said, "This is selling," right?
Yeah.
So,
I may spin that a little bit differently. I think selling is simple. I don't know that's necessarily always easy, but
a better word, yes. I mean, it's straightforward.
It's straightforward and simple. I mean, my first boss, taught me that by and large, a lot of the lessons I learned back years and years ago selling something a lot less complex, held me in good stead when I was selling things worth millions of dollars. It was still the same fundamental things that you focused on. Yeah, I sort of recently have boiled that down to an acronym. I think the 4 things you need to be able to master.
Yeah.
Simple habits, selling habits in order to succeed. And so I have the acronym BALD, B-A-L-D. and it's, you have to be present, ask great questions, listen without judgment, which is really a hard one, and deliver value on every touch.
Yeah.
And if you do that, what else do you need?
It's not complex. Well, you need the confidence or lack of fear, right, Or another way to think of it is an abundance mindset, so that you can say no to things, right? The vast majority of these make-believe deals are simply there because the reps are reinforcing them, be it acting defensive or whatever, because they want it to be true. They need it to be true. They don't have enough top of the funnel activity. Therefore, they don't have enough stuff coming in the top of their pipeline. Mm-hmm. They don't have enough conversation. So every deal all of a sudden becomes, really important to them. And they need it to close. They want it to close versus, when I come into an organization, the first thing I want to do is have the reps almost overloaded with top of the funnel meetings where they're saying, gosh, I'm meeting with new prospects all the time, right? So as things move through the pipeline, they're no longer afraid of saying, let me apply a little more scrutiny here. Let me see if this is real. Let me push on it. Oh, I'm not afraid of offending my prospect by asking, a horrible question like, so who's going to pay for this, right? Literally, prospects say, how do you ask somebody, who's going to pay for it? You say, who's going to pay for this? How does your organization invest money when they want to buy something? When was the last time you actually wrote a check for $30,000? You just ask them like that. It's not offensive. It's called business. Mm-hmm. It's not a state secret.
Well, I love the expression. But I think one of the other sort of aspects of that, though, in terms of, this qualification, disqualification is that, the next level up is, you can have somebody that understands, decision-making process and who the decision maker is, and maybe even had a conversation with them.
Yeah.
But you're still not qualified to sell to them, and they're still not qualified to buy your product. And that's, to me, is like the next level. The pipeline is still full of those.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And they're never going to close because they're not qualified to buy your product.
Right.
But
yeah, they're not really there.
Yeah, but you get that sense as well. We did BANT, right?
Yep. Yeah.
And thus they belong in the pipeline. It's like, no. And I put some of the blame on this on sales managers is being too accepting of some of this stuff and not spending the time.
Yeah.
To do a deep dive on the pipeline. And I've even gotten some pushback from people about, well, we don't do one-on-ones like that anymore. And,
wow. We don't actually review deals. That's
and it's like, as a manager, how do you operate without that?
Yeah. Well, that's like some of these organizations saying we don't cold call, we do social selling. What kind of nonsense is that? The open rate on an email is 15% if they know who you are. It gets worse from that. And I still see these organizations saying, well, we try to say, we sent out 200 emails last week with a blah, 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 really want to meet with you. Let me know what's good in your calendar. You think that's a prospecting strategy in 2017?
Some people do, right?
I guess.
Yeah. I
don't know.
Yeah. There's no getting, somebody just asked me a question. I said just on a webinar before you an hour or so ago. And yeah, people are asking the question, is cold calling dead? And I'm like, no.
Yeah. Who told you that? Give me their address. I'll go over there with a baseball bat and cap them in the knees.
No.
Yeah. I mean, actually, but the answer is yes. Stop doing it because teams that I train will do better. Teams that you train will do better. Yeah, you should stop cold calling. Memo to all of Andy's listeners: cold calling's over. You don't need that crap. It's so passé.
Yeah, send your cards and letters to Townsend.
Yes, please. Here's what I'm really concerned about, right? And that is that we have actually had an unprecedented run up over the past couple of years in terms of sales organization growth, investment in sales, investment in marketing technologies. Companies are dumping a lot of money. Now, I've seen a tremendous amount of movement in the last 6 months, even in the second half of last year. I think generally a lot of companies are doing actually pretty well. The problem is we're going to hit a bump here at some point. It might be a little bump, might be a big bump, but I went through the 2002 world's going to end, the 2009 world's going to end. By the way, there was one before 2002. I can't remember what date that was, but it got pretty ugly.
87.
Yeah, there you go. This happens in, what do you call that thing when it happens it happens in a pattern. And it's going to happen again. And right now, if I'm a sales team, if I'm a sales organization, if I'm even an individual contributor, this is called make money when the sun is shining, make hay when the sun is shining, right? Mm-hmm. And if people aren't honing their skills, absolutely maximizing their income, their earning, the corporate revenue, whatever, when things go sideways, it's going to get ugly. You're going to see massive downsizing in these organizations. You're going to see all sorts of panicking. And I think it's going to be really unfortunate. So contrary to what you would think you would see happening, which is organizations really investing in dialing in their process, getting tight with how they're actually coordinating sales and marketing, really enabling their people to be at maximum efficiency, they're just sort of skimming the cream off the top. I mean, I see so many, valid leads and opportunities just falling on the floor through pure neglect. And, this is the time when you should be just pouring all the money into your bank account. And, I don't know if it's 6 months, I don't know if it's another year, maybe longer, but the stuff's going to hit the fan, and organizations are going to have a real massive adjustment. It's going to be an unfortunate time in my mind. I'm kind of worried about that.
Well, it's inevitable, as you said. We go through business cycles.
Yeah.
We haven't had a correction for almost 10 years.
Right.
I mean, a sizable one. And there was 2008, 2009. There was 2000, 2001 before that. 87 before that.
Yeah.
87 was the Black Friday, but then 87, 88, 89 weren't great. I mean, so yeah, it's going to happen. So that's an interesting question. For the individual contributors, make money. That's sort of like realtors, right? I mean, if you're in real estate and you're a realtor, they know this better than anybody. They're more painfully aware of these cycles than anybody in their business. And they have to make hay while the sun shines, and then save a bunch of money because there will be lean years.
There will be lean years, absolutely.
And you see it, at least in like the San Diego area where I spend part of my time is you just the realtors they scaled back their teams, and there's many more realtors that are out looking for work or doing something else, and then when it gets better, and it happen in business to business sales as well. I mean, so I think the thing for reps is not just make money, but it's hone your craft, hone your skills, make yourself invaluable to your company and your customers. And if you can do that, if you can learn your product, your service, your industry, customers, business, the more you invest in that, the more you invest in your own development, the better off you're going to be when this inevitably happens.
Well, I got a question for you on that, because one of the surprising things I see is, at least in the clients that I work with, a surprisingly rare tendency for people who have chosen a career of sales to actually self-invest in their own betterment, right? They'll certainly go to training if their company provides it, but I'll ask reps, what's the last book you read? Whose podcast do you listen to? Who do you admire? Who are you following? And I sort of get these,
the
blank
answer to
stares.
all those questions is me.
Well, I hope so. I hope your people are following you. But and of course, I always recommend your stuff. But I don't see it enough. I mean, for me, if you're not investing, an hour a day in learning, right? We live in this time where all this information is available. It's free. It's amazing. Heck, go through the folks that have been guests on your show. Google them, and every one of them has piles of free resources that'll make you a better salesperson. That you'll learn something, right? But
I actually, interestingly, I agree. I mean, though I see reasons to be a little bit optimistic. I mean, certainly podcast listenership is going up across the board. So
it's good.
As we see, our workforce, the age distribution of our workforce change. I mean, I think, what was the figure I just saw recently? Like 25% of all college graduates listen to podcasts. I mean, so, you have to assume that skews younger to a certain degree, but not necessarily. I mean, but so we, podcasts are making it easier to consume some of that. The episodes we do on books, especially on my Friday episodes with Bridget Gleason, hugely popular, and people love that. And maybe that's because people listen to the podcast have a propensity to read books, but I think part of the solution is that companies have to stop with this idea that professional development is something you have to do on your own time.
I agree, absolutely.
And so if you're a sales leader, if you're a CEO of a small business, I had a guest on my show quite a long time ago who brought this up, who in his own company, and he's been a serial entrepreneur, his own company, set aside, I forget how much, 30 minutes every day. Reading time for people to read books on company time. And I've had set a similar program with a couple clients to do the same thing. create a curriculum for them.
Sure.
And what they had to agree is they'd set aside 20 minutes a day for their sales team to read.
Yeah.
And it was actually
awesome.
15 minutes to read and 5 minutes to reflect on it in a journal. We bought them journals. It's like, I can't believe the pushback you get from sales managers. Say, we can't do that. It hurt our productivity. I'm like, well, first of all, people are only spending about 30% of their time actually selling, right? And this is why, if you expect them to go home and turn off the TV and read this book, you want them to succeed for you, give them the time during the day. And then you can be assured that it's going to happen. And they're going to
it pays huge dividends, right? I mean, just absolutely.
Yeah, and the cost of the program I put together for clients is approximately equal to what I would charge for one day of a training.
Right.
And they're reading 10 or 11 books. I mean, they're getting way more out of doing it every day, every week than they get from as good as my training is. Human nature. Human nature is they're going to forget about it in 30 days.
Sure.
Right? That's what the research all shows. We forget in 30 days. Yeah, you put it in the book, you read it, you integrate it into your daily process. So, bottom line, CEOs, sales managers, set aside time in your own day, every day, to get people to read something or to listen to a podcast. You can do that, and more and more sales teams are, listening to podcasts during weekly sales meetings. Yeah. Do something like that.
This is Townsend Wardlaw, and I approve that message.
There you go.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Got to charge you a sponsorship for that, but so yeah. Well, okay, so we're in violent agreement about most of that stuff. Yeah.
What do we disagree? What do we disagree on? Anything?
Oh, I don't know. Let's see. What's today? So today, as we record the show, it's the NFL draft is tonight. So this show's going to air well after that. Are you a diehard Bronco fan?
No. I'm not a diehard sports fan at all. That's good. That probably keeps me out of most arguments.
Well, frees up all your time.
That it does. Yes. Yeah. It's funny. I don't really follow sports. I don't watch much TV. I got rid of my cable box about a year ago. I destroyed. I got off of Facebook 2 years ago. Although I'm back on it because I'm doing Facebook advertising, which is amazing. Mm-hmm. But I deleted all my friends except for my mom and my sister because they would have gotten mad if I deleted it. But literally, I've got 5 friends and I don't check it. Yeah. So yeah, I don't have any. I just do the drinking thing. That's kind of
the drinking thing. Okay, well, good. That's sort of a recurring theme here. So, but you were toying around with Snapchat like a year or so ago.
I was. I got off of it in disgust and really can't stand it. It basically is just like Facebook. Same sort of time suck. Same sort of very, very low commoditized value being conveyed. I think if you're a real personality, if you're a real internet influencer. I've got an audience of about 14,000 at this point, which is it's great. It's not huge. Sure. It's not like a Gary Vaynerchuk or somebody like that. But honestly, it's not for me. I have a very simple way of communicating with my audience, and I think it delivers a lot of value. And there's people I think that both can give value in a 20-second snap or whatever the heck it is, and I think there's people who can get value out of a 20-second snap. I'm just not either of those people. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's fun to watch you experiment with it. So.
Yeah. That was an interesting experiment. I gave it the old college try, and I was like, I am sick of this. I'm gonna hit myself in the head with a hammer if I got to keep doing this. So.
Yeah. Well, the people I was following, I've really seen the volume tail off over the last 6 months. So.
Yeah. Well, and it's Instagram's doing really well.
Yeah.
But
that's picked up.
It's interesting. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say I was out at the Traffic and Conversion Summit about a month ago in San Diego, and I went there 4 years ago. And these guys are the leaders in digital internet, online marketing, et cetera, et cetera. And 3-4 years ago, this crowd was predominantly what I call internet marketers, right? They're, selling survival kits and systems and join my How to Make Money on the Internet club and whatever. And I went out there because I wanted to see how they were doing what they were doing and the applications for, what I do and, my own personal audience building and B2B, et cetera. So there were about 85% or more of these, internet marketers, really fringe. They wouldn't like me saying this because some of these guys are, 7-figure and 8-figure fringe earners.
Yeah.
But not the world that you and I play in for the most part. When I was back this year, what was fascinating to me were a couple things. One, it was 85% B2B and digital agencies. It had completely flipped. So the B2B world, digital agencies have gotten the message that this is how you move people, down the pipeline.
Right.
That was number one. And then the other big aha, if you will, was the digital world has finally gotten what I think you and I have known all along, that it's about converting to a conversation. Marketing is not going to take over sales. It's not going to replace sales. It can only take people so far. And in fact, 3-4 years ago, and I tracked this sort of nonsense, you could convert people to upwards of a $5,000 or even $10,000 program, right, where they're literally paying payments and signing up without ever speaking with them, right, all online, right, through various programs. That number is down to about $750, and in some cases lower, right? Organizations that sell $500 little packages, they got to do a sales call. So the imperative for having a conversation, right? Marketing's job has really settled into how do we move people through, all the early stages, et cetera, to the point where they're willing to have a conversation. So the good news for everybody listening is that this only increases the imperative on knowing how to have a good conversation, right? At the end of the day, you're going to have to hand this to a human being, not a bot, not an AI robot, but a human being who can interact with another human being and get them to give you a credit card, sign on the line that is dotted, whatever your metaphor is. So that was really fascinating to see how that has flipped, and to see how it is all about moving people through a process to get to a conversation.
Yeah. No, I agree. Well, hey, Townsend, we're going to have to end on that. Great note, though. Very perfect. Very optimistic for the future of sales, and I agree. I think the complexity of interaction between two human beings is always going to be the province of people, as opposed to
that ain't going away.
Yep. All right. So, Townsend, tell people how they can find out more about you and connect with you.
You can go to www.townsendwardlaw.com. It's spelled like it sounds. You can find me on LinkedIn. Hit me up. I got a ton of articles. I got a YouTube channel. Frankly, I think if you just put Townsend and sales, you're probably going to just find me. It's pretty easy, but tons of resources, free stuff. I'm always, like my man Andy here, putting out great content that's really designed to help people, salespeople, do their jobs better. Sales managers and for my target audience, smaller business owners trying to grow.
All right. Well, good. Well, Townsend, as always, pleasure to talk with you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Andy.
We'll do it again. And friends, thank you for spending this time with me today. Come back, join me again tomorrow. Until then, thanks for joining me. This is Andy Paul. Good selling, everyone.